We're back. The Detroit Lions Collective. I'm your host, Jeff Iafredi. We've got Detroit Football Network's own Justin Rogers, 97.1 The Ticket Zone. Will Birchfield looks like, we're figuring out the background. He looks great on that background, by the way. I mean, he has a different background every single week. And then the Athletics, Colton Pouncey. We are back. The Lions come off a massive victory over Ben Johnson. This was the way it was always going to go. All right, 52 points. We called it. We talked about it last week. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we called that.
Yeah. We saw this coming. No, I'm kidding. Massive victory for the Lions. We'll get into that, give our thoughts, and of course, we'll get to the Ravens game later in the show. We'll give out our dog and pony picks of the week.
Hey,
new proud sponsor of the program. Shout out to them, and then we'll get into our sleeper read as well. Shout out to them. But fellas, how we feeling here on a Wednesday after a victory?
I'm kind of appreciating this extra day off today. Obviously, we pay for it later in the week with a primetime game on the road, nonetheless. But just a little downtime today felt pretty damn good. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to squeezing in a little hangout at Dog and Pony Show Brewing right after this recording. So if you guys are out there and you're nearby, come say what up. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, that if you mention Lions Collective at Dog and Pony Show Brewing, you get $1 off your beer. So If you don't think I'm dropping that, you're out of your mind.
I feel the same first and foremost as Justin with the extra day off. It feels kind of nice. And yes, I think we're all going to try to make an appearance there for the most part. So come on out and see us, say hi, and thanks for the support if you do.
Yeah, that $1 off beer, man. I mean, this turns from like a 3 to 4 beer night to maybe a 5 to 6 beer night. I mean, that's what that does, $1 off beer for me. So I love it. We got to all go out there.
You get 8 beers, and at that point, that's a free beer, right? Yeah. I think the 9th one pays for itself. There's some math in there. I think it maths.
Boy math, yeah.
The BC. That is, man. The BC. Boston College. Oh, yeah. It's great. I mean, fellas, I had a blast watching so it's funny how the first 2 weeks for Lions fans, and maybe it's this is the way it was always going to be because it's the most interesting. Week 1, you're watching a game and by halftime you're going, okay, this is getting a little out of hand. You end up finishing it. It wasn't ideal. And then it's the complete opposite the next week where it's from quarter 1, you're like, oh, this is awesome. I mean, like they have complete control of the game. They put up 52. You got shout out Jeff Rieger, by the way. He's an animal. Goes right to Ben Johnson, straight up ask him, how demoralizing is it that your former head coach decides to go for it when he's up 48,000 points in like the fourth quarter? It was a great game. It was good for the Lions. Obviously, the Lions players talked about how much that game meant to them, but it was good for the coordinators and just for the offense in general to kind of get back on track. But we'll kind of get into some of our takeaways. What are some takeaways for you fellas just from the game? I know it's hard. I mean, they scored 50. They could have scored 70 points. I know Dan Campbell went on 97-1. It was like, well, I guess if there is a negative, we didn't score off turnovers, but they put up 52 freaking points. What are some takeaways for you guys that you decided to take away from that game itself?
Yeah, before we even get into the Lions game, I think perception started to kind of change earlier in the week on Thursday night with the Packers game, right? Like they go in and play Washington, another really explosive offense with a dual threat quarterback, a team that the Lions are obviously familiar with the playoffs last year, and once again just shut them down. And so I don't know if it's a good thing that the Packers defense is that good. I don't know if that really calms a lot of fears within the division, but I think it gives some perspective on that season opening performance that you ran into a buzzsaw while you were trying to figure some things out. And so, that's kind of where maybe the narrative started. Then, you get into this game, and I think it's a really strong positive for John Morton, right? Like that's a guy that, whether he would agree with it or anybody else would agree with it, he needed it. He needed it with the criticism that he was facing early. Came out with a really good game plan built around play action, setting up the run, and it all clicked in such a magnificent way.
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, you can't teach that level of troll that Jeff Rieger possesses. Like you are born with that.
It's just in you.
You don't acquire that. That's innate. That's God-given. Also, I don't think he went to journalism school, or at least if he did, they didn't teach that you don't provide the answer in the question. How demoralizing was it? Like just plugging the answer for him before he even had a chance to answer the question. But just great stuff by Reegs. I'll echo Justin. The biggest fear for a lot of fans approaching this season was the offensive line, and that fear came to fruition in a big way in week 1. And I think the biggest question that needed to be answered in week 2 was just a response by the offensive line, and that happened in a huge way in pass protection. And look, Jared Goff said it himself this morning, also here on the ticket. That was as good of a game in pass protection as he's ever seen from his offensive line. And that means a lot coming from a quarterback who has played behind some elite units, not just here, but also early on in his tenure in LA. And, it's not lip service. If you look at the numbers, they back him up. He was pressured just 4 total times on Sunday, which is the fewest of any game he's played in his Lions career, which is now in his 5th season. The previous low was 6, which happened twice last season against Arizona and Tennessee, and then once in 2022. It was really clean all the way across the board, and especially with Mahogany and Ratledge. Those 2 guys stepped up in a big way in week 2 against a defensive line that has some names, has some bodies. I mean, you got Grady Jarrett out there, you got Montez Sweat. I mean, it's not the 85 Bears, but that defensive line does have some talent. And at least in terms of pass protection, man, Mahogany and Ratledge and Glasgow, who came under a lot of heat in week 1, really proved that they were up to the challenge. And that should make a lot of Lions fans feel better about this offense moving forward.
Yeah, for me, this felt like a statement game, not for the team because it's the Bears they're playing after all, but for Dan Campbell. And, he's had to hear all offseason, the coordinators are gone. You're going to lose Ben Johnson. The offense might fall off a cliff. Like, there's been a lot of that talk, like as if they don't have all this offensive talent on their roster. And, Dan's one that's, always going to put that on the players and say, look, we got good talent. We have dudes on this roster. Like, we're going to be fine. But I promise you, deep down, there's a part of him that wanted to have a game like this and just to prove, hey, we're not going anywhere. He said after the game, look, this train keeps on rolling. Mm-hmm. This is kind of what we do. And you heard his players kind of echo that. Amik Robertson after the game said, we wanted this one for Dan. You hear Amon-Ra St. Brown say, we wanted to put on a little show. You hear JMO saying, hey, I didn't really see much of a drop off to do, sort of those comments after a game like this. And so to put up 52 points, while you're playing the guy that your success has been attributed to quite a bit over the years, I think that's a statement. And again, it doesn't have to be this sort of seismic shifting, narrative game, but I think it's important to get one like that and to do it in that fashion to just let the NFL know we're still here. We're not going anywhere. We got dudes on this roster and you're gonna have to deal with us.
And I want to go back to the play action point I was making. Earlier in the week, Dan Campbell talked about bread and butter and getting back to what they're good at. And we all know they're really, really good. Jared Goff in particular is really good in play action. In this game, they were really good at everything, quite frankly, in the past game. But, 11 of 13 in this one, perfect passer rating. On those 11 completions, you're talking 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. And what's interesting to me was how it was deployed. And I kind of hinted at it earlier that, it was used to set up the run as opposed to the run to set up the play action. Most of those play action passes, particularly through the first half and really even carrying into the fourth quarter, were on 1st and 10. They started the first 2 drives with play action passes. And I think that really contributed to the pass protection. It contributed to the run game success. It contributed to just a comfort level for the offense, the explosive plays, all of it. And, if you look where there's still meat on the bone, if you will, it's the interior of the offensive line is still gelling in the ground game. That's where Ratledge, Mahogany, Graham Glasgow still weren't kind of clicking. If you look at most of the runs in that game, they averaged, they gained a ton of yards. They averaged a really healthy, I think 5.9 yards per carry, but very, very little of that came up the gut. It was a lot of runs around the edges, a lot of leaning into the running backs and the tight ends, blocking on the perimeter. And look, you gain yards with whatever works for you in the NFL, but you have to be able to run through the tackles. So that's an area that they, if you're looking for an area they need to clean up to take that next step beyond 52 points, apparently, that is it.
Yeah, and I think they know that. I caught up with Mahogany and Ratledge in the locker room at the same time after the game, and I asked them just to kind of assess their own performance, and they seemed pretty pleased with it. I mean, they scored 52 points. How couldn't they be? But when I asked them if they felt like they had made a statement about their readiness for the NFL and for playing on this offensive line after what they both acknowledged was a poor performance in week 1. Mahogany cut me off like before I could even finish. Once he heard me say, does this feel like a statement? He was like, no, we have to keep playing like this. We have to keep playing better than this. We have to continue to improve every single week. He knows damn well what the standard is in that offensive line room, having spent one season here last year and getting a couple starts. And he also knows that one game of solid pass protection doesn't meet that standard. So those guys might have been pleased or encouraged, but they weren't satisfied. They weren't content. They know there is, as you said, J. Raj, still more meat on that bone, but the play action was lethal all game long. And it was never better illustrated than on the touchdown to Brock Wright, where I think it was on 1st and goal from the 8.
Mm-hmm.
They had Demo lined up in the backfield. Jared Goff play fake to Demo, and Kevin Byard, the safety, bites hard on that play fake because the Lions to that point had run the ball so well, especially around the edges. And once he bit and Brock Wright was in motion right to left, it was the easiest pitch and catch for a touchdown that Brock Wright will ever have in his career. And that is the essence and the value of running the football and then deploying play action. And that happened a number of times. I thought it was clearest on that touchdown.
Colton, it sounds like we missed some near BC on BC violence in the locker room.
Yeah.
Sounds like it, yeah, doesn't it?
Yeah, we have a comment here from Wickster. Shout out Wickster. He says, I still think that Montgomery should be number 1. Wear them out with Montgomery and stretch them with Gibbs. It seems like the first 2 games, Johnny Moe, it seems like it's kind of the opposite of what it's been. Monty to kind of soften up the defense, and then Gibbs comes in. It seems like Gibbs is starting these games, and then Monty comes in. But what do you guys think of Wickster's comment here about that?
Yeah, that was sort of a trend that we saw in training camp. I think the idea is just, hey, this is Gibbs's backfield now. At least he should be the 1A after the stretch last year when Montgomery went down with the knee injury. He was so good in that 3-4 game stretch, I want to say. He really kind of put the team on his back there, at least the offense, so to speak, and was really efficient, was racking up yards, was scoring at ease. And so I think you always kind of knew that was in him, but to see him take that step late last year, I think, getting in a guy like John Morton, who was able to watch from the outside looking in, say, hey, we should probably just get this guy, out there to start these games. And, obviously some issues in week 1, but week 2, you really wouldn't know it outside of the stuff in between the tackles, I would say. But the off tackle stuff, the outside zone runs, that's where you see Gibbs at his best when he's, getting into the second level. He had a juke on the sideline where I don't even know if you can call it a juke. I think I saw him on the St. Brown Brothers podcast saying I didn't even intend to do that. A guy that Jamo was blocking came back inbounds to try to tackle me. And I just kind of was like, oh my goodness. And dance around at the last second just to get by him. But that was one of the craziest moves I've ever seen. Just the little toe tap just to get by him. So he has that sort of skill level in him. And I think you want to get that guy as many touches as possible. And it seems like that's starting to be the idea. But at the same time, a guy like Monty, I don't want to discount him at all because he was great this summer and was in really good shape. I think that's something we all kind of noticed. And so, a bit of a slow start for him as well. I think it's the run game in general, but he's still a major piece of this offense and he can wear down guys just as well as Gibbs can. So, both those guys are going to be used, and it was good to get both of them in the end zone in a game like this.
Yeah, I think that there's more overlap to the skill set than maybe people think. And obviously Jahmyr Gibbs is a crazy elite change of direction speed athlete, but Montgomery's got a pretty healthy amount of athleticism to him as well. And you saw it, in this game multiple times he makes tacklers miss at a phone booth, and he was able to get an edge and, turn some negatives into, quality positive gains here. And then Gibbs runs between the tackles and he runs hard and he runs tough. And so I think that the counter to the idea of Montgomery wearing him down late is, don't you want that guy when you're trying to put away a game against a tired defense to be at his freshest? Isn't that a more valuable resource to have the bulldozer come in when the legs are burning for the defensive line and just making them feel it and putting that game away? It's kind of the identity in some ways are part of the identity of Detroit. And so I think the flip is good. I think you lean into your best talent, you get him more touches. I think I kind of said it was going toward a 50-50 to maybe 60-40. touch ratio, and that's what it looks like it's going to be here this season. I think that's the right balance for these two backs.
Yeah, I think back to the Rams game in week 1 last season, which ended exactly the way you just described, J-Raj. They went to Demo late in that game and then to start OT, and he ran right through the guts of the Rams defense. They could not stop him. They were so worn down, and he was peeling off 10 yards, 12 yards, 8 yards, and then ultimately into the end zone. And nothing the Rams did could counter his power at that point in the night. They were exhausted, and he just stuck the knife in them. I also, in this game, liked the way Morton and the offense deployed some misdirection in the run game. It felt like on a couple of Gibbs's big gains, they had the offensive line working one way and then a toss to get Gibbs going back the other way. And the defense never really came up with a solution for that. At one point in the fourth quarter, Goff, I think on a toss to Gibbs, noticed that he was basically one-on-one with the safety and had his hands above his head, convinced he was going to score a touchdown. I was shocked that Gibbs actually got chased down, but that was a really impressive game for Gibbs all the way around.
Yeah, it was J-Mo too getting chased down. He was Scotty Montgomery. He's like, I thought you were fast, man. What's going on? It's like same with Jameer. That's like the only two negatives. I guess the two fastest guys on the team got chased down. I will say, and it's easy to critique coordinators when they don't have good performances, but it's time to praise them when they have performances like that. Like John Morton, I know we talked about it from like a player versus player matchup, but coordinator versus coordinator matchup, John Morton had Dennis Allen to go up against, which I don't think that's an easy task either. So I got to give John Moe, and you talk about NEOC in the beginning of a game and how all the scripted plays, which Ben Johnson, notably with the Bears this season, their scripted plays look great. And then as the game goes on, it gets worse significantly. I thought John Morton, from like a play calling standpoint, ended pretty much the same way. I mean, they were efficient all the way throughout the game. Dennis Allen was, it seemed like he was just out coaching Dennis Allen, which I'll give John Morton a ton of credit for that. And then Calvin Shepard, from a defensive standpoint, going up against Ben Johnson, he coached his butt off as well. And he had those guys like the defense. I mean, yeah, you had Roma Dunze in the yards he caught up, and I know there were some miscommunications probably in the secondary with DJ Reed and Taron Arnold, but overall, that defense, like Dan kind of harped on one-on-ones, they won one-on-ones. They won a ton of them on defense. You had Davenport get a sack, AQM get a sack, Aiden Hutchinson get a sack. Hutch probably could have had 2 or 3 sacks. It seemed like he just was so close to getting two other ones. But it seemed like, and it's funny and ironic that every edge got a sack. When everyone's talking about the edge room, all of them got sacks against the Bears. So credit to those two coordinators as well. I mean, they got a lot of heat in week 1 and week 2, coached their ass off against 2 very good coaches, Ben Johnson, of course, and Dennis Allen. So credit to Johnny Moe for that, man. I know he was pretty sick of all the questions about the Packers. Like, let's just move on, man. All right, can we just move on from this crap? And then he just goes out there and drops a 50 bomb on the Bears. Very Johnny Moe style. So appreciate it for that.
I will say one of the coldest lines in hindsight from last week was Johnny Moe saying, "Yeah, I know Dennis Allen. Nothing I haven't seen before." In hindsight, saying that on a Thursday before you drop 52 on his head is actually crazy.
Yeah.
So shout out to Johnny Moe for doing that.
Yeah. Also, shout out Jared Goff, man. He has taken as much heat or skepticism as anyone on this team this offseason. Obviously, a lot of people are happy to credit his success to Ben Johnson, and Jared heard that as much as anyone. Jared's the king of I block out the outside noise. Let me just reference some outside noise here real quickly. He is fully aware of what is said about him, and he has relished since arriving here, proving a lot of those narratives wrong. When he was walking through the locker room after Sunday's game, going back to his stall, towel around his waist, he had just thrown 5 touchdowns, offense racked up 500 plus yards, set the franchise record for yards per carry. I just nodded at him and said kind of in jest, like, hey, decent game, huh? And he responded loud enough for anyone to hear in the general vicinity, yeah, sky's not falling, huh? And look, I don't think any of us suggested the sky was falling, but again, they heard that on the outside. And Jared played as well as he has maybe played in his entire tenure with the Lions on Sunday. He was precise from his very first throw to St. Brown. One stat that stands out to me, his his completion percentage over expected in week 2 was the highest of any quarterback in the NFL. He was 17% better than what he was expected to complete based on, factors like down and distance, field position, air yards. And just to put some math to that, if you take the 28 throws that he attempted and assume that he completes just the expected rate of 65%, you're talking about 5 fewer completions. And when you look at some of the most difficult throws he made, obviously the one to Tesla stands out. That set up a touchdown. The catch was incredible. So was the throw, or just a couple of his touchdown passes to St. Brown, where he's releasing the ball before St. even has his head turned around. Just spoke to how well-oiled Jared was on Sunday. And the play action was obviously cooking. And the one thing I'll add on Jared is he has some nimble feet on Sunday now too. He had a couple plays where the pocket was collapsing around him, and he maneuvered and slid and shuffled and avoided pressure. And on one completed a pass to Raymond, on another completed a pass to Laporta. Both of those drives ended in touchdowns. He was as good as he's ever been in Detroit on Sunday, and he deserves credit for raising his game when everyone was pointing toward his predicted demise with Ben Johnson on the other sideline.
Let me say something about Jared Goff. In the same way I took on Brad Holmes in the same regard, Jared Goff has terrible friends in his group chat. I'm just going to say it right now, like terrible friends, or maybe they know this is what triggers him, but they must send him the most stupid shit, like from every angle, or he just drives home listening to 97.1. Will, I don't know, no offense, like, because like the distorted reality that he uses to fuel his chip on his shoulder is just not there. Like, obviously there are talk radio elements to that, or there are talking heads on the 97.1, or I'm sorry, the ESPNs and the national stage, but like the people that are there every day, like that's not how we talk. That's not how we write. That's not how the questions are formed. But then, he clearly thinks that way because he went on the podcast. What was it, a year ago in the summer, and talked about how the media in Detroit was all negative. It's not reality, and whatever, if that's what it takes to fuel you, so be it. But like, I think at some level as human beings, we have a personal responsibility to separate, different people, like all fans. Like, I don't say all fans, like I know the crazies and I know the normals. Like, it's the same thing with the media. It's the same thing with the players. Jared Goff's not Kyle Allen. He's Jared Goff. And so whatever, man.
Yeah. He ended his weekly spot today after being peppered with questions last week about John Morton by saying, like, they had done 15 minutes and they hadn't asked yet about Morton or Shepard. And he was like, wait, before I go, you guys don't want to ask about the coordinators? You asked last week. You don't want to ask now? And they're like, oh, you want us to? He was like, no, I'm good. Just making sure. So, I think part of what drives Jared might be some of these contrived notions that people are expecting or waiting for him to fail. But that's also real nationally. And he takes note of that for sure.
He's basically I took that personally, MJ meme from Last Dance. That's kind of how he operates, which is cool. Like, I think, any fuel you want to use to drive your game, or to say, hey, we're still here, like we're not going anywhere, like go for it. I would say most of that probably does come from the national level. There are a lot of kind of talking heads that were out there talking about the loss of Ben Johnson, how detrimental that's going to be to this team this year, that are now like, oh, Lions are back. And I'm just like, really? You're not like, you should feel shame for what you said last week. There's a lot of like, oh, maybe they should have hired Tanner Engstrand after one good performance from the Jets last week. And then, they laid an egg in week 2. Yeah. Exactly. So I think the lesson here is to kind of stay grounded. This is a long season. There's always going to be reactions after week 1. And I understand that, but I think you bet on the guys that you have in that locker room. Like, they're here for a reason. They don't get too high or too low in the moment. You let everyone else take care of that. You block out the noise, and you kind of, do what you do. So if you want to bring a little bit of that noise in, I understand it if it helps fuel you, but these guys know what it's all about, and they got what it takes to kind of move past that stuff.
And you're hitting on a super important point here, right? Like, it's one game the other way. Like, you can't get too crazy about this game. It was awesome. Like, they did a lot of great things. They won by 30 points in a game that You certainly circled for reasons of that they could be tripped up, and they took care of business. But like, it's still one game. It's still early in the season. Like, at least there's a little bit more track record to this level of success. But like, nobody should be overreacting to week 1, and nobody should be overreacting to week 2. It's, what are we, like 10% away into the football season?
Yeah, let's not rush it, by the way. I mean, like this. I mean, we waited a long time for this.
Yeah.
So let's just keep it. And the thing I love, and you guys brought up the narrative that, Jared Goff's going to miss Ben Johnson. It's just funny to me that it can't be the other way. Like, Ben Johnson can't miss Jared Goff.
Hey.
And he said it in a press conference when he was speaking to the media, probably about a month or two ago, when he said the expectation completion percentage-wise for Caleb was 70%. And it's ironic that Jared this season is at 70%. Where do you think he gets that number from? Like, he's gotten to play with one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the National Football League. And now Ben Johnson has to adjust to Caleb, who I think is talented, but he's just a completely different quarterback than who he's played with. So it is funny that now people are like, oh, wait, maybe Ben can also miss Jared Goff, because Jared Goff seems to just consistently be one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the National Football League. And he's actually, I think, more, and you guys already kind of alluded to it, more of a competitor that people actually think. He's way more petty. He might not be the most entertaining listen in press conferences or interviews,
which is intentional.
It is intentional, because he knows exactly what he's doing. And speaking of that accuracy, by the way, the pass to Isaac TeSlaa has as many catches as he does hands made to make those catches. And by the way, speaking of overreacting, they might have. I've seen Snowdell Beckham Jr. I've seen Mayotron. I've seen. There's a lot of.
I didn't hear that one.
I'm just reporting the names. All right, the Snowdell. I got Vanillatron, Mayotron. It seems like Isaac TeSlaa is just making John Morton's job a little easier, because now he's thinking, I have to get this dude more and more playing time. Every time he gets a target, and I know Ahmed Rogers on his podcast today and said he told him before the game, or like a day or whatever in practice, and was like, hey man, if you catch another one-handed touchdown, I'll buy you a car. It might be a beater for $5,000, but I'm still going to get you a car. And he makes a one-handed catch, not for a touchdown. It sets up a scoring play on Amon-Ra. He gets the receiving touchdown. And then Isaac just goes up to him and says, hey man, it was almost, it was close. Like, just so casually. This dude, I'm starting to realize, like, now, and obviously at the time, like I've already stated how wrong I was for even questioning not the player but the trade to go get him. I understand, Brad Holmes, I apologize. Your evaluation of wide receivers is off the charts. This man can identify wide receivers like it's some of the best. He's one of the best in the league at it, among other positions, but just that position, for whatever reason, he's elite at. And Isaac, man, they might have another dude that can step up if there's an injury or whatever and be a very, very good wide receiver too for this football team. And he brings something that they don't have now, trading away Tim Patrick. He's going to be excellent. He's going to be an excellent player.
Yeah, he's just got to improve his fundamentals. I mean, only using one hand to ever make catches. What are we doing? Like, you have two. What are we talking about? No, I it was encouraging to see TeSlaa's role get expanded last week. Still only gets the one target and the one catch, but did play 17 snaps. I think ran 10 or 11 routes, and one of them he was also free on for a potential like 60, 70 yard score on that 16-yard shot to St. Brown over the middle, which, by the way, was another brilliantly thrown ball by Jared Goff, low and away where only St. Brown could get it. They had TeSlaa in motion on that play, sprinting from one side of the line to the other to get into a go route at top speed. And he left the DB in the dust, maybe 10 or 15 yards into that route. And if Jared maybe waits a tick or two longer, he can launch a 60-yard ball to TeSlaa for probably an uncontested touchdown. And maybe St. Brown is the first read on that play, and maybe TeSlaa is more of a decoy. But it was just interesting to see the Lions deploy TeSlaa in more interesting ways this week. And that role is only going to expand. And I think you're right, Jeff. Like, the one thing this offense lacks, at least in theory from a pass catching department, is the guy that can win those 50-50 contested balls down the field, especially in the red zone. That really was Tim Patrick's role last year. And TeSlaa has all the physical tools and ability to fill that role himself. And I know we talk about it all the time, but man, does this guy crave blocking in the run game? There was one play
Feisty
on Sunday where he was blocking a receiver and literally started pass setting like an offensive tackle. He was like crab shuffling, like he was playing on the offensive line to seal off that DB from making a tackle on either Gibbs or Montgomery. He really is a Lions receiver in every sense, every way. And, I bet if it was 17 snaps on Sunday, it might be closer to say 20 or 25 next Monday night. He's making it impossible to not incorporate him more and more in these game plans.
I think the funniest part about that blocking play was Tyreek Stevenson wanted to keep going after the whistle. And unlike some of maybe Tesla's teammates, as soon as the whistle blew, he just walked away like nothing happened. And
J-Mo was like, "Yo, get him!"
It made me think about Brad Holmes' Senior Bowl comment, right? He was just pissing DBs off. And it was like, that's exactly what that is. I do find it kind of hilarious. Like we talk about Brad Holmes' ability to evaluate wide receivers. Like he's nailed it in the draft. Just absolutely nailed it. Free agents.
Yeah.
I mean, we got the Rashad Perriman and the Terrell Williams and the Donovan People-Jones. Like, I don't know what the separator is there, but you'd much rather hit on the draft picks. That's for damn sure.
I think this might be Trinity Benson's big year. We just got to give that guy a look.
I forgot about Trinity Benson. I don't know how.
He was here for like 3 years. Trade, to be fair, not a signing. So maybe he falls into a different bucket.
The DPJ bucket, to be fair.
Yeah.
Bucket.
Right. So much of it just goes into like knowing how to use a receiver. Because a lot of teams draft these guys and have no idea what to do with them, or the system they played in college didn't know how to feature them, like we saw with Tasla at Arkansas. When you watch his Arkansas tape, he's running a lot of hitches and comebacks, and it's like, yeah, he can do that, but I don't know if that's the best use of him. And I think when you watch him on the Lions, even like the limited routes that he's running so far early in his career, a lot of it is just like he's running guys off and freeing things up underneath. So even on that route where he was open downfield, that allows you to kind of open things up and take a look at a guy like Saint running over the middle, or Laporta, just other targets in this offense that is so stacked. And so to add a guy with long speed, a guy with height, a guy with hands to this array of pass catchers that they already have is just an embarrassment of riches. And the Lions are using him very well, and they're targeting him on plays and routes that he knows how to run. They're taking advantage of his long speed. I actually think DBs don't really realize how fast he is. Yeah. So there's this element of surprise that's working to their advantage as well. And, when he's doing all the little things that you want to see, and when he continues to gain the trust of the coaching staff and becomes a full-time starter, this offense is going to be downright nasty. I really don't know how you stop them unless you're just getting constant pressure. But as we've seen, they took a step forward in that department, and, they're going to hope to keep that going. But I mean, Saint, J-Mo, Laporta, Gibbs, Montgomery out of the backfield, and then you add Tasla into that mix as a full-time featured receiver. Watch out, man.
Yo, let me just say too for Tesla, he enjoys the shade that's being thrown Arkansas's way. Anytime they post highlights of him making plays in the NFL, and everyone's like, why didn't you use this guy? You had him. I brought it up to him last week, and I'm so glad I don't want to quote him directly because we were just kind of chatting, but Colton, I know you got involved on this trend recently. Let me just say he appreciates the trolling that is being directed Arkansas's way for the idea that they're celebrating this receiver making plays now when they barely even knew how to use him a year ago at Arkansas. He has a highlight reel of one-handed catches from his time at Hillsdale that were unreal. Those weren't making SportsCenter, he said. These obviously are, but this isn't random. Like he does have a knack for making these insane plays, and the more chances he gets, you have to figure at this point, the more he's going to make. And St. Brown might have to buy him a bucket, as he called it. He might have to buy him a bucket here at some point soon.
Next time, next time this dude makes a catch, go on Arkansas's Twitter and look for the highlight and just read the comments. Because they're all just like, so man, good. What you played for us? Like, I don't blame you for thinking that. So,
I just wonder if St. Brown's trying to dump the Cybertruck as a tax write-off at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. And, I think Isaac, I'm excited. I mean, it seems like now we're at the point where it's like, should he even continue to catch with two hands? It's like,
right.
Like, just don't do it. Just don't do it, man. You're making all these plays. We're going to get to Lions Ravens in a little bit here, but first we do have to tell you guys about our sponsor of the show, which is Sleeper. And before I do that, we'll be back after a short message from Sleeper.
Sleeper is the #1 fantasy sports app. It pays to know sports. Pick more or less on top players. Your first pick is on us, so start winning now. Play in Texas, Georgia, Minnesota, and 27 more states. Pick anytime across all sports, pregame or live. Over 10 million players are already on Sleeper. Make your picks count. Score up to 1,000 times your cash. Join today. Get up to $100 credit using the code HMA. Call your shot on Sleeper. Download now.
Sleeper is a fantasy sports plus real money gaming app focused on bringing people together through sports and gaming. Sleeper's become the fastest organically growing fantasy platform in the world, with over 6 million active users in 2023 and only continuing to grow. And then you have Sleeper Picks, which is a real money product that connects friends over picks. It's very easy. You just choose 2 to 8 of your favorite players from pregame, live, or even across different sports. Just pick more or less than the predicted stats. And on Sleeper, you can get up to 1,000x payouts. You share with your friends and get rewarded together. Use the code HMA to get a $100 deposit matched up to $100. So shout out to our friends over at Sleeper for that. But fellas, before we get to Lions Ravens, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Davenport's injury, which had people, just stopped in their tracks when it happened. And it's not, and I want to make sure I make this very clear, because it was after a sack. So that's kind of the overall, it's the story of Davenport. It was never a
Davenport experience.
Yeah, because it's never a talent issue with Davenport. Yeah. He's a talented football player. And to be honest with you, I don't even blame Davenport. I think from a human being perspective, he can't control it. It's not like he wants to get injured. He goes out there and just plays hard, and things happen and kind of unravel that way. We don't have any, at least I haven't seen anything yet. Dan Campbell talked about they'll know more by the end of the week. They're getting a second opinion on Marcus Davenport. But Dan did speak very highly of Al-Quadin Muhammad, who had a sack in that game as well. And he did talk about that AQM's probably going to have a much bigger role against the Ravens, kind of being that defensive end 2 spot. Spoke very highly of him as a rotational piece. And I think we can all agree that he's shown to earn a spot on this team. But just from the Davenport side of things, I know fans are going to wait on the I told you so moment, which I don't think is fair to Davenport. I think that's, if you have an issue with not addressing the edge position, that's a thing you probably go to Brad Holmes for, not Davenport. I think he should be absolved from all the, because his family sees a lot of that stuff too, like the hate that goes his way for no apparent reason. But what'd you guys make of just him going down and kind of the Lions, I guess, where they kind of pivot from here, and then AQM stepping in potentially to that role for this Monday Night Football?
Fans needed something to complain about now that Broderick Martin's no longer here, I guess.
That's true.
I think that the concern was laid out all offseason, that you were counting or banking on a guy that has durability concerns. I don't think they went in blind to that. I think there's a reason they brought back Muhammad. I'm going to keep throwing these numbers out there in written word in this podcast, in everywhere I can. But if you extrapolate his pressure rate over a larger sample size last year, he only rushed about 200 times. But if you extrapolate it out to a full workload, it was not far off from Zadarius Smith's. It wasn't. And I know you can't guarantee that's what's going to happen with a bigger workload, but it's not like he was playing 10, 15 snaps. It was these full workloads. It was just a shorter span of the season. And when he gets opportunity, he's answering the bell. And so Muhammad is a really, really great piece for them. And they have other guys on the roster with flexibility. Obviously, Josh Paschal is down right now as well. I think that was an unexpected thing since he got hurt between free agency and the start of training camp. You've got Pat O'Connor that can do some of the inside-out stuff and crush the pocket the way they like. And so they do have guys. I don't think Dan Campbell is needling people when he says we're good. It's a coach backing the guys and expressing confidence and belief on the guys in his roster, as opposed to throwing them under the bus. Like, there's a reason these guys are here. And would they be better off if they had one more edge rusher? Yeah. So would the other 31 teams. Like, it's a tough position to find talent, and you could only spend so much on what amounts to insurance. And so Muhammad at the end of the season might end up being one of the biggest values in the NFL.
Yeah, hey, you tell Cash Doll that he's not needling people. You let her know that.
Apparently, I just did.
I'll just say briefly on Davenport in his defense, he really did make over his offseason regimen this year in terms of the way he prepared his body for the season. He got with Jill Costanza, who is the Lions director of athletic training. And, they came up with an entirely new workout plan that was focused on fluidity, and they used more free weights. He felt much more stable in his core entering this season. He hired a new chef in the offseason. He was as healthy, maybe healthier than he's ever felt entering this year. And look, the reality is he gets hurt once again in his second game. But just to be clear, it wasn't a lack of preparation on his end. He really felt like he had put himself in the perfect spot this year to be available. And the injury on Sunday might just speak to the fact that, look, he's injury prone. Like there's no other way to say that. You hope that this isn't long term, but if it is, Al-Quadin Muhammad does look like a piece that could spark this pass rush. And I was really surprised in that Packers game that he played so sparingly. And I even asked him about that last week, and he said the same thing. He was like, yeah, I was surprised. Only 7 snaps, only 4 pass rushing snaps. But he said it wasn't something that frustrated me. I trust the coaches. I trust their plan. It wasn't anything that I did wrong. And he felt like he was going to get his chance in week 2. And he did. And he made the most of it. I mean, look at his sack on Braxton Jones, and say what you want about Braxton Jones, but when Dan Campbell talks about Muhammad playing with power first, that's what he's talking about. Like, Muhammad just put his head into Braxton Jones' chest, drove him backward, shed him at the last minute, and got home for the sack. And he might have something against Braxton Jones, because he also killed him last year at Ford Field on Thanksgiving when he just barreled over him and dropped him into the turf. And to go
Looked
back,
like he was shot on that play.
Yeah. To go back to the sack on Sunday, the Bears basically had 2 linemen between Jonah Jackson and Darnell Wright, and a receiver who were focused on stopping Hutch on the other side. And as Dan Campbell says again and again and again, in cases like that, someone has to win their one-on-one. Well, Muhammad got his one-on-one and won it cleanly. And like, it wasn't a perfect game for him. I think he still has some work to do in the run game. At one point, he got sealed off pretty cleanly by Luther Burden on a design run for Caleb Williams down in the red zone, where he just couldn't get off that block. But as a pass rusher, the numbers are pretty tantalizing through 2 games, and that bears repeating through 2 games. But if you look at his pass rush win rate, he's right now among the top 10 defensive ends. In fact, he's 6th, 28% smack dab between a couple of guys you might have heard of, Trey Hendrickson and Micah Parsons. Now, there's context to those numbers. He's not seeing near the amount of double teams those guys are. He's getting much more favorable matchups. But it's just worth pointing out, to echo what Justin said, he does have a knack for making the most of his opportunities. And Dan Campbell loves this guy, dude. Like, going back to their time in New Orleans, when Dan Campbell was the tight ends coach and Muhammad was a rookie defensive end. Muhammad tells a story. There was one practice that year where Campbell, kind of being the psycho that he is, would always have his tight ends take one-on-one reps against defensive ends. And he just remembers back then Muhammad being a bull, like being a terror to deal with in those reps in practice. And he told them way back then, you keep practicing like this, you're going to be a player one day. And it feels like they were kind of destined to reunite all these years later. When Campbell talks about Muhammad, the appreciation for his motor and how tirelessly he plays is real. And when Campbell sees in players this devotion to their teammates, he's going to get them on the field. And I think the more and more we see him win those one-on-one reps, the more he's going to get chances on Sundays.
Yeah. I go back to, just going back to Davenport real quick. I go back to when he re-signed with the team in March and, spoke to some of us in Allen Park. He looked like a guy that kind of knew he's running out of opportunities in this league, and a guy that knows, like, hey, teams aren't going to be able to trust me because my body's breaking down. And that sucks. There's nothing I can really do about that. A lot of it is just circumstance. And, to see him leave that game twice, one with an ankle injury, another with a shoulder injury, and he had a large ice pack wrapped around that shoulder in the locker room after the game, you kind of felt for him. And you're asking him, hey, man, how you feeling? And he's just kind of like, I don't know. We'll find out.
Yep.
And that looked like a dude that's really going through it. And so I think about that first and foremost. I think about, the messages that he gets on social media, that his family sees, that he sees, that's something he's talked about before. It's hard not to see all that stuff when that's all people are saying about you. But that is sort of the reality of the job. Like the best ability is availability. And he just has not been available that often to teams in his NFL career. And I think that's sort of why, we have this discussion every year that you decide to bring him back. And it's like when the Lions were re-signing Emmanuel Mosley, he gets hurt again. It's like some guys just have this luck that like you can't really count on them to stay on the field. And it's unfortunate, but it seems like he's one of those players you can fit in that description. And so when you hear Brad Holmes say, we'd love to get multiple edge rushers, 2 or 3, or, bring in multiple guys in here. And he said that at the combine in February. And then to not really do that, I think your words say one thing, your actions say another. And I really like Al-Quadin Muhammad as a piece, but I understand like, hey, you're counting on Davenport to play a lot for you. And if he can't play a lot and you're focusing on Al-Quadin Muhammad to step up, he can do that. I don't know how much you want him to play. I wonder if that like reduces his effectiveness. I think he's perfect in this like number 3 role right now.
Yeah.
But if he's forced to play more long-term, I think that's maybe where you can run into some issues. And that's sort of the risk you play when you kind of run it this way and, create your roster this way. So that's the only thing I say. It's nothing new. It's something that we've all talked about before, but I certainly feel for him, Marcus Davenport, and, hopefully it's nothing too major, too lingering where he has to miss multiple games.
I wonder, just real quick, I wonder if Brad Holmes viewed the trade deadline as the potential safety net for a Marcus Davenport injury, knowing that if that were to happen, they could swing a similar move that they did last year and bringing in the proven number 2, who ended up having to be the number 1 with Hutchdown also into Darius Smith. And the trade deadline will come up pretty quickly here, and we'll get more light on Davenport's injury soon. But there is the possibility that they felt comfortable entering the year with Davenport, knowing that if an injury arose, they'd have a chance later in the year to address that need. And he didn't shy away from making a move last year, and he might pull off something similar this year if they need to.
I'd be surprised, honestly, if that was his approach. Just if you remember, he said Davenport was the toughest negotiation deal he ever had to do, and it was frustrating and went down to the deadline. I'd be surprised if Brad is banking on that possibility. I do think it's worth mentioning, and Joseph brought it up in the chat, like Davenport's contract is structured in a way that the Lions were braced for this, and, very little guarantees. Most of it is baked into playing time, per game bonuses. And so, if he doesn't play, they don't have to pay him, at least, I guess, in some ways. That's a good thing. And then, Jeff, I really need you to clip out where Will compared Muhammad to Micah Parsons and just take out all the other take out all the other context and then send it in the group chat to Jared Goff.
Done. Absolutely done. Hey, Kenny Powers, appreciate the $5, my friend. He says, will the Lions finish higher than 22 of 32 teams in the NFL for sacks on the year? In year 5, it's never happened under Brad. Then sprinkled in some emojis in there too, just to put a statement on it. So
is he saying, will they be a top 10 team in sacks?
Or I guess higher than 22 of 32. I feel like they've been higher than 22 before, but maybe I'm crazy on that. But yeah, I guess top 10 would be even better than.
20. I got you. Yeah, I read that wrong.
So they were 1 away last year without Hutch. So maybe, it doesn't seem like it's unrealistic. 1 more sack would have put them above. I think they finished 22nd last year, 23rd last year. So look, if Hutchinson gets you 12 or 14, that puts you a third of the way there. I think it is certainly realistic to think they could finish in the top 2/3.
Yeah, I think so. They were 23rd last year, 23rd the year before, which is actually hilarious. Yeah, I think they can. Hutch stays healthy. We just talked about Davenport's health, but I think they can find other ways to generate the pass rush. I think Brian Branch, again, I said this like before the season, I think, but
yeah,
he could have some sacks here. I mean, he almost had a second one, or at least it seemed like he's getting in there quite a bit, and I love how they're blitzing him and using him in this kind of pass rush department. So I think he could have some. I think Al-Qadim Muhammad could have some. I think Ali McNeil, if he gets back, maybe on the earlier end of that timeline, could get in there. So, we'll see. But they definitely got to kind of generate it elsewhere if Davenport's not able to play.
Yeah.
Check in with the Detroit Football Network tomorrow on a Lee McNeil update.
Oh, nice. A little
Oh,
plug.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Nice. Yeah, I think they'll be top 20. And Colton, there were multiple times on Sunday watching Brian Branch blow up DeAndre Swift that I kept remembering what you said, that there's a chance Brian Branch ends up third on this team in sacks. And I'll tell you what, the way that Kelvin Shepherd is utilizing him lends even more credence to that idea. He is an absolute demon, man. I think he might have been onto something. I'd be shocked if they're not a top 20 team in sacks, even if Davenport does miss some time. We saw Tyreek Williams start pushing the pocket a little bit too last Sunday and had two really critical batted passes and showed off a really quick move to beat Jonah Jackson, who was kind of sliding towards Hutch for no reason on one play. But it was encouraging to see Tyreek show some of that pass rush ability that the Lions insisted he had, but we never really saw him get a chance to show at Ohio State.
Yeah, I think the Lions fans should feel much, much more confident heading into Monday Night Football against the Ravens. I know if you check the lines right now, the Ravens are 5.5-point favorites at home, which again, it is what it is. They are at home. It is in Baltimore, and we know what happened. Last time they went to Baltimore, but this is a different team, of course. But what are your guys'? We'll get to the picks kind of towards the end of the show, our actual game scores and picks, but just on the matchup itself, because I will say, I guess if there is some criticism for me for this defense, I guess it would be week one. I said they would hold Josh Jacobs to 3.5 yards a carry, and I pulled that number out of my what, and they actually held 3.5 yards a carry. I promise that was just an estimated guess. They did that. They did a really good job, I thought, against Josh Jacobs. And I thought against the Bears, for whatever reason, there was a couple plays where, there were some plays on, especially on that run defense, where it looked a little leaky, a little shaky. And now this week they got Derrick Henry. So it is a great test for the run defense. And of course, Lamar Jackson is always a tough task for any NFC team. But what do you guys kind of think heading into Baltimore for Monday Night Football, coming off that type of victory? What's kind of your confidence level that, besides winning the game, yes, but just hanging with the Ravens? Because before people thought, yeah, that's a loss. Mark it as a loss. And now it feels much more of a confident matchup coming from Lions fans.
I struggle to express any confidence with this one. And a lot of it is rooted in history. This team goes to Baltimore and they get wrecked. I understand it's a better team. It's a more experienced team. It's a team that's coming off some feel-good vibes, but they were coming off feel-good vibes in 2023 as well. They're 5-1, having won 4 straight, having beat the Super Bowl champs in the opener, and just got shellacked. I mean, it was rough. And that team did not have Derrick Henry. And as well as the Lions played against the Bears, I thought there was still a lot of shakiness to the defense. And some of it they got away with drops or pre-snap penalties. The Ravens aren't that team. Like that's a well-oiled operation as well. And so
in the
I think
playoffs,
my big concern, and somebody wrote that, like, somehow convinced the trick them into thinking it's the playoffs. Like that's the secret. But I'm just not convinced that the defense has tightened things up enough to stop them. And so your best bet, your best hope is to get into a shootout. And, I think that was probably the hope last time as well. And the offense couldn't get going either.
Yeah, I think Lamar is the boogeyman. Like, if I'm being honest, you kind of heard it after the game on Sunday. They're in the locker room, and Brian Branch gets game ball, and he goes, "All right, guys, let's celebrate now because we got the Ravens coming up next." And then everyone's just like, "Oh my goodness, I forgot about that."
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously the last time these teams played, it did not go particularly well, 38-6. I will say the Lions were missing, I believe, David Montgomery, Brian Branch. I want to say Jonah Jackson. So those are, some key pieces that you're going to miss and probably need against a team like that. I will say the Ravens did not have Derrick Henry at that point. So that's also another element here. But in terms of this Ravens defense, I actually think that the game script, if you're going to beat them, has to be a shootout because they've given up points against good offenses. We saw what happened in week 1. I know that's Josh Allen, but I think this Lions offense is as talented as any in the league, and they can put up points with anyone. So if you have a good game plan offensively, and like you can go toe to toe with Lamar offensively, because this defense, they have some really nice pieces, obviously, but they're still figuring some things out, it seems like. So this is a good time to get them while they are figuring things out. So if you can make this a shootout, I think you're okay giving up 35 points if you score 38, right? Like, it's just, let's get out of here with a win if we can, by any means possible. So I think that might have to be the script if you can't stop Lamar, and he does, in fact, look like the boogeyman against you, and Derrick Henry is running all over you. Just get out of there, escape with a win if you can. I think you don't really care how you get it, but I think they'll have a chance. We'll get to our picks in a second, but that to me sounds like the script. And I'm curious to see if, Dan Campbell says something similar, because as we talked about, he kind of has a feel for how these games go. Yeah. And sometimes he can really predict, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, we're going to need to do this. I'm curious what he says this week when he talks just about the matchup at hand, and, what the guys have to do to get this one done, because whatever he says, I would tend to agree with without even hearing him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can bet they're going to have to go for it on fourth down a couple times on Monday night. It feels like it's going to be that kind of game where, if you're 4th and 3 near midfield, you're 4th and 5 near midfield, you got to go, because you can't punt the ball back to Lamar Jackson, especially when they're wearing the all-black uniforms. Like, you talk about boogeyman, you put those Ravens in the all-black uniforms on Monday night, the only way the Lions can respond is to wear the all-blacks themselves. Just come out all stuff with your all-blacks and just try and confuse the hell out of everyone on that Ravens offense. I think if you're looking for signs of hope for the Lions on Monday night, the Ravens pass protection has also been a little bit leaky through 2 games, and they do have some big names on that offensive line, but they've yielded a decent amount of pressure on Lamar, which might only invite him to scramble on Monday night and leave the Lions defense even more exposed. By the way, who's asking Shepard about using a QB spy tomorrow, boys? Who's bringing up the question first? Someone has to do it. Okay. I wouldn't expect them to do that. The other, and look, Monday night, DJ Reed and Terrion Arnold need to step up. Both of them together need to play better, in my mind, for the Lions to have a chance in this game, even if the Lions offense is pushing 30 plus points, because both of them, and I think you guys would agree with this, look really good in training camp. Like, we weren't creating that. There was even one point, Colton, like, I think it was me, you, and maybe Jeremy Reisman in the back of the end zone one day, like halfway through camp, talking about who might be the most impressive player so far. And Terrion's name was legitimately floated out there. And this was, I forget if it was before or after his camp injury, but that was real. And DJ Reed's play was real. And it just has not translated to the first 2 games of the season. And one of them is going to have to cover Zay Flowers on Monday night. Shout out Boston College. And he's a lot. He's a lot to handle. And I know we had Terry on our cover of this episode. I know we only have a minute and a half here, but just look, he needs to step up, and I think he would be the first to tell you that. He was even bailed out a couple times on drops last Sunday. The run support for both of them has been really good, but those guys are paid to defend the best receivers in the league, and so far they haven't been up to their own standard that they showed in training camp. So those two have to step up in tandem Monday night.
Colton, Lamar Jackson is the boogeyman for the league. The guy is the transformation of him over the last couple of years has been incredible. And I was looking at the numbers, because last year he led the league in QBR and passer rating and touchdown rate and yards per attempt. He's doing all that again, and the numbers are significantly higher. Again, it's a 2-game sample size, but like, I think that's the Derrick Henry effect and Lamar's legs. Like, you have to put so many resources close to the line of scrimmage. He's got a wonderful deep pass. And so it's so tough to defend that Ravens team. But I think the weakness is their secondary. They've got 2 young players at cornerback and at safety, and Malik Starks and Nate Wiggins. We don't know Marlon Humphrey's status because he's got a groin injury, had to leave the last game. So I think there's a possibility that the Lions pass game could continue to succeed. And that's where I think that, maybe we get fortunate enough to see a shootout here where the Lions could actually move the ball and get into the end zone.
Well, we have our Dog and Pony Show Brewing pick of the week, which we're getting into. Shout out to Dog and Pony Show Brewing, of course, for supporting the show. Give me your final score, fellas. I got 31-27 Ravens. Don't murder me, please. I have the Ravens win.
But give me 34-24 Baltimore. I just don't think the defense is there yet. I think they'll get there. I think they'll get better, but not week 3.
I got 34-28 Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. There's too much firepower on this Ravens offense, I think, for this Lions defense to account for at this point in the season. If they have a path to victory, it's Brian Branch being NFC Defensive Player of the Week and just wreaking havoc in every which way as a blitzing dime linebacker, as a safety who covers like a corner, as a guy who comes downhill against the run and maybe takes down Derrick Henry a couple times behind the line. That to me feels like their best counter to Lamar Jackson. But yeah, I don't see how they get enough stops on Monday night to give their offense enough chances. I think Ravens 38, Lions 31.
We did it. We gave Jared Goff his fuel. 4 writers picking the Ravens.
You're welcome.
We did
Jared
it.
Goff.
We did it.
Incoming Jared Goff, 8 passing touchdowns. That's what's going to happen here. Maybe it's a jinx, and I'll look at it like that. Maybe it's a little bit of a jinx. We'll find out. Appreciate you all as always for tuning in weekly. We're live Wednesdays, 6 p.m. Lions Collective. Hit the subscribe button, the like button, of course. Go ahead, Will.
And before you guys go, we are going to go to Dog and Pony Show Brewing. The 3 of us. I think you have other responsibilities, Jeff, or you would join as well. But we are going to be there around 8:00 tonight. Have some beers, watch some Tigers, talk some Lions. So come on by, say hi. If you can't make it tonight, definitely stop through at some point and mention the Lions Collective and get your 8 beers, get your 9 for free or something like that. No, it is $1 off if you mention the Collective.
You know what this means, Will? You're drinking my beer, so appreciate that. All right, you're drinking my beer. Hold him to that. He'll have Jeff's beer. Yeah, I can't make it tonight, but I'll be sure to make it this weekend. I'll stop over there, man. Appreciate him as always for supporting the program. We'll catch you guys next Wednesday, recapping the Lions-Ravens game, and then, of course, previewing the Browns. But until then, we will catch you all.